Peace be upon you, and welcome to a new episode. On May 28, 2016, inside a large villa in an area called Huda, Sector 17 in the city of Jagadri, Haryana, India, the morning light slowly crept through the window into a quiet bedroom. The wife had just woken up beside her husband. She reached out to wake him, as it was almost time for him to go to work, but he didn't respond at all. She called his name again and gently shook his shoulder, but there was still no movement. At that moment, she began to feel that something was wrong. She leaned closer to his chest to listen for his breathing, but there was none. His heart wasn't beating. She let out a loud scream that echoed through the house. The neighbors rushed in to see what was happening, and their young daughter came down from upstairs, unable to comprehend what she was witnessing. She immediately called her father, a well-known doctor in the city. He rushed over without hesitation. As soon as he entered the room, he sat beside the body and began performing CPR with his hands, trying to open his eyes and shine a light into them, hoping for any sign of response. He kept pressing on his chest for long minutes, but there was no pulse, no breath, not even a blink. A man in his 40s, in very good health, with no medical history and no medications, had suddenly died in his sleep, in his own bed, without a single wound, without a drop of blood, and without any sign that something unusual had happened. Everyone in the room at that moment, even the doctor himself, was convinced that it was a sudden heart attack, something that happens, something natural. There was no reason for concern, and no reason to question it. But the truth no one could have imagined was that this moment would mark the beginning of one of the most complex and disturbing murder cases ever seen in the state of Haryana. A case that would take 5 full years from his family, built on evidence without a body, and haunted by recurring nightmares in a mother's sleep, until the truth finally emerged after being hidden behind all those tears. The man's name was Yogesh Batra. He was the owner of a plastic and wood factory called Batra Plywood Industries, and one of the richest and most well-known businessmen in the city of Jagadri in the Yamunanagar district. His name was always mentioned among the wealthiest people in the city. Besides his plywood factory, he owned several other successful businesses. Yogesh was known among people as a kind and family-loving person. He never fell short when it came to providing for his family, whether financially or emotionally, and he always wanted to see them happy. He had been married to Priyanka Batra for many years, around 17 or 18 years. Their story began back in college where they studied together. Later, their families approved the relationship and they got married, building a life together. They had a daughter named Quaish, who was a teenager at the time, and a son who was studying along with his sister at a boarding school in Dehradun. They were living a very comfortable life. Wealth, social status, a large house in an upscale area, and no visible problems to outsiders. Yogesh's parents, Subhash Chandra Batra and Sushila, were living in the state of Uttarakhand, in an area called Katima. They used to visit their son from time to check on him and his family. On the morning of May 28, 2016, the day we talked about, Yogesh was rushed by ambulance to the hospital, but the doctors there declared him dead immediately. What's strange is that no one asked the most important question. Was an autopsy performed? No one thought about it because everyone was convinced it was a sudden heart attack, especially since Priyanka's father himself was a doctor. He was the one who tried to revive Yogesh, and he was also the one who confirmed that the symptoms resembled a silent heart attack. Based on that, on May 29th, Yogesh's funeral was held, and he was buried immediately without any medical examination. That decision in particular would go on to haunt the family for many years. Yogesh's parents stayed for a while in Yamunanagar after the funeral to support Priyanka during that difficult time. They decided to delay their return to Katima so they wouldn't leave her alone. And at first, Priyanka did appear to be grieving. But over time, strange details began to catch their attention. On the first night they returned to their home in Uttarakhand, Sushila woke up terrified from her sleep. She told her husband that she had seen Yogesh in a dream, standing in front of her, frightened, screaming that people were holding his arms and legs and trying to kill him. He was begging her to save him. At first, the father tried to calm her down, telling her that it was natural to have such dreams due to grief and overthinking. But just 2 days later, the same dream happened again, with the exact same details. At that point, the mother held firmly to what she believed and said, "How can the exact same dream repeat like this? This isn't just grief. It's as if his spirit is trying to send me a message." As time passed, the matter grew to the point that she spoke about these dreams publicly when the case gained attention. She said she kept seeing her son being dragged by people holding him, begging for help, and this made her feel that it wasn't just an ordinary dream, but a mother's instinct warning her that something was terribly wrong. Subhash, the father, who had been trying to convince himself that what happened was just a heart attack, also began to doubt. He kept thinking. His son was 42 years old, in good health, with no medical history and not taking any medication. How could he suddenly die like that without any warning? His doubts grew stronger, especially when he started noticing Priyanka's behavior shortly after the death. Strangely, she began returning to her normal life very quickly. She was laughing and talking on the phone as if nothing had happened. Not only that, she also transferred ownership of Yogesh's company, Batra Plywood, into her own name, without consulting anyone in the family, even though it would have been natural for the company to remain for her and the children over time. All these details turned his doubts from a simple feeling into something much bigger. In June 2016, Subhash decided to go to the Jagadri police station and report his suspicions. He told the officers that his son had died under unusual circumstances. The first question he was asked was, "Where is the autopsy report?" But it was too late. No autopsy had been performed, and the body had already been buried. The police recorded the complaint and left it at that, without taking any serious action. They believed the elderly man was overwhelmed by the shock of his son's death and imagining things. For months, Subhash kept going back and forth to the police station, with no result. Eventually, he realized no one would help him, so he decided to take matters into his own hands and hired a private investigation agency. The investigators began working very discreetly, gathering every small detail about Yogesh and Priyanka's lives. They went back as far as their college days, meeting mutual friends and relatives, all under normal pretenses so no one would suspect an investigation was underway. Subhash was determined to keep everything completely secret and not let Priyanka find out in any way, so she wouldn't have the chance to hide any evidence or act differently. This decision would later prove to be very important and change the course of the story. The first thing that caught the investigators' attention was Priyanka's behavior shortly after the death. Although she was supposed to still be grieving, she had already returned to going to the gym regularly, and it didn't stop there. The investigators began monitoring her movements and noticed that she was frequently meeting a gym trainer named Rohit Kumar, also known as Maddie. In July 2016, about 2 months after Yogesh's death, Priyanka traveled with her daughter Qaish to the city of Chandigarh. The investigators followed them to understand the reason for the trip. Then, on the night of July 23rd, the surprise was even bigger. Priyanka and her daughter were photographed at a lively party, dancing and laughing as if nothing had happened. With them was a third man, someone who seemed unusually close to her. The investigators focused on the photos and obtained clearer images of the man. When they looked more closely, they realized he wasn't a stranger. He was the same gym trainer, Rohit Kumar. The investigators also uncovered a strange detail. Priyanka had bought Rohit a new car worth around 22 lakh rupees, approximately $23,000, as a birthday gift. This was an unusually large amount for an ordinary gym trainer, which made the investigators certain that the relationship between them was far more than just a normal friendship. When Subhash, the father, saw the photos, he said that this man had visited his son's house several times before. The agency then used its connections to obtain the call records of Priyanka and Rohit. They found that on the very night of Yogesh's death, May 28th, there were around 40 calls exchanged between them. Rohit's phone location was also very close to Yogesh's house at the exact time the death occurred. With this evidence, Subhash returned once again to the Jagadri police station. On September 14, 2016, an official complaint, FIR, was registered against Priyanka and Rohit as suspects. The police summoned them for questioning, but the surprise came in October of the same year, when the police granted both of them preliminary clearance, stating that there was not enough evidence linking them to the crime. Subhash was deeply shocked by this decision and felt that something was not right in the way the case was being handled. So he decided to take a bigger step and went directly to the Director General of Police, DGP, of Haryana. He presented all the evidence he had gathered himself: photos, call records, and phone location data. The DGP was astonished that a man in his 70s had managed to collect all this evidence on his own, without any official help from the local police. He immediately ordered that the case be transferred to the Karnal police and that a special investigation team, SIT, be formed to reopen the case from scratch. The new team began investigating more seriously. They questioned neighbors and acquaintances of Yogesh and Priyanka, and everyone confirmed that they had seen Priyanka and Rohit together multiple times. They also said that Rohit continued visiting the family home even after Yogesh's death. The official investigation confirmed that Rohit's phone location was indeed near Yogesh's house on the night of the incident. The team also discovered that both of them had used a new, temporary SIM card on that specific night, a tactic often used to avoid tracking regular communications. Another strange detail emerged. A call was recorded from Yogesh's daughter, Kwaish, to her mother Priyanka at the exact time the crime occurred, even though the girl was in the same house, upstairs. This raised a troubling question. Why would a daughter call her mother while they were under the same roof? On March 21, 2017, the police arrested Rohit Kumar. After several days of intense interrogation, he confessed that he had participated in the murder of Yogesh and that Priyanka had been his partner in both planning and carrying it out. The next day, March 22nd, Priyanka herself was arrested from her home in Yamunanagar. After several months of investigation, on June 15th, Judge Jagdeep Jain at the Yamunanagar court rejected the bail request submitted by Priyanka and Rohit, stating that the evidence against them was very strong and that they did not deserve to be released at that stage of the investigation. From that point on, the true details of the story began to unfold before everyone. The story began in 2015, when Priyanka felt that she had gained weight and decided to join a gym near her home. At that gym, there was a trainer named Rohit Kumar, who started training her and helping her with her diet plan. Their relationship began very normally, but over time it developed into something more, turning into a secret romantic affair. Rohit used to visit Priyanka at her home during her husband Yogesh's absence. Around January 2016, Yogesh discovered the affair himself when he caught them in a compromising situation inside his house. A major confrontation followed, and he threatened to file a case against them if it ever happened again. Priyanka and Rohit apologized and claimed that the relationship had ended. Yogesh forgave his wife, especially since their marriage had originally been a love story. For a short period, things calmed down, and Priyanka appeared more attentive to her husband, but that didn't last long. Soon, the secret relationship between her and Rohit resumed. This time, instead of trying to fix the situation, Priyanka turned things around. She began arguing with Yogesh and even threatened to harm herself if he tried to expose her. She told him she would make sure he would be the one to end up in trouble in front of everyone. This decision didn't come suddenly. It was the result of very cold calculations. Priyanka weighed all her options. Divorce would mean starting from zero, or perhaps even worse, especially since she was completely dependent on Yogesh for her lifestyle. On the other hand, murder, despite its danger, seemed, in her eyes, like the only solution that would guarantee her everything: money, power, and the future she wanted with Rohit. On his side, Yogesh felt that something was wrong, but he never imagined it could reach this level. The tension at home kept increasing day by day, and their arguments became almost daily. Over time, he began to distance himself, but that distance was not enough to protect him. Meanwhile, Rohit was indirectly pressuring Priyanka. His debts were growing, and the people he owed money to were not the kind who would wait patiently. Every time they sat together, he returned to the same point: if we had money, everything would change. That sentence kept echoing in Priyanka's mind until it turned into a firm belief. From that moment, the plan began to shift from an idea to an intention, and then into actual steps. She didn't just want to get rid of Yogesh. She wanted to do it in a way that would look completely natural, like a normal death, without raising any suspicion. This was the most dangerous part of the entire story, because executing such a plan required a very cold mind, patience, and precise details, where even the smallest mistake could expose everything. Priyanka presented the plan to Rohit, and he agreed immediately without hesitation. Both of them knew they needed others to help carry out the plan, so Rohit brought in two of his acquaintances. One was named Satish Kumar, and the other was Shyam Sundar, who was known by the nickname Sonu. Sonu, in particular, worked in a hospital and had good experience with medical procedures such as injections and sedatives. The three men, without Priyanka knowing all the details, agreed among themselves on a specific sum of money in exchange for carrying out the crime. Satish and Sonu were from the Saharanpur area in the state of Uttar Pradesh, and each of them entered this plan for one reason only: money. On that night, every detail was carefully calculated, at least in their minds. Choosing May 27th was not random. On the contrary, it was deliberately selected to fall on an ordinary day with nothing unusual about it, so it wouldn't attract attention. Even their communication on that same day was handled with extreme caution, using a new mobile SIM card, a step they believed would protect them from any tracking. Around 10 p.m., the movements on the ground began. Priyanka arrived in an Innova car at the railway station in Yamunanagar. From there, she picked up Satish and Sonu, and then Rohit joined them. Each of them knew their role, or at least their part of the plan. One shocking detail that later emerged in the investigation was that her daughter, Qaish, was in the car with them during this time. Her presence added a much deeper layer of complexity and mystery to the events, pushing the case into an even more disturbing direction. When they reached the house, they didn't all go in at once. Rohit, Satish, and Sonu stayed outside, in the dark, away from drawing any attention. As for Priyanka, she entered alone in a completely normal manner, as if it were just another ordinary night. The agreement was clear. She would leave the back door open and give them the signal at the right moment, when Yogesh had fallen into a deep sleep and there would be no expected resistance. At that point, everything was going according to plan. But what they failed to realize was that any plan, no matter how carefully designed, can collapse in a single moment if even one unexpected variable appears. Around 11 p.m., the moment they had been waiting for arrived. Yogesh fell asleep, and Priyanka carried out her role exactly as agreed. She opened the back door and allowed Rohit, Satish, and Sonu to enter quietly. Sonu relied on his hospital experience and had brought 2 injections of a sedative to end the situation without resistance. The plan depended on speed and silence, but reality turned out to be very different. The first attempt to inject him failed. Even while asleep, the noise and movement around him woke Yogesh up. Within seconds, the operation turned from a silent execution into a direct confrontation. Yogesh woke up, realized there were people around him, and began to resist. Panic took over. The first syringe needle broke, and then the second one broke as well as they tried to inject him again. At that point, everything spiraled out of control. Yogesh could now see them clearly, and that was the worst possible scenario. There was no turning back, and no way to leave him alive without exposing themselves. In that moment, Priyanka was the one who made the final decision. No hesitation, no discussion. She told them they had to finish what they started. What happened next was quick and brutal. The 4 of them held him down at the same time. Yogesh tried to resist, but the numbers and force were against him. A pillow was pressed over his face, and the pressure continued. Seconds later, everything went still. There were no visible injuries on the body, no blood, which made them believe they had succeeded in the most important part, making the death appear natural. At that moment, they thought they had committed a perfect crime. But the truth was that the chaos during the execution was filled with small details that, over time, would be enough to expose everything. After they confirmed his death, Priyanka told the other 3 to leave the body where it was in the room. She knew the symptoms of a heart attack well, since her father was a doctor, and she believed she could play the role of the shocked wife convincingly in front of everyone. The 3 men quietly left the house. Priyanka cleaned the room of anything that might attract attention, then waited for morning to begin the performance she had long prepared in her mind, screaming, calling the neighbors, and contacting her father, the doctor. And indeed, when morning came, everything went exactly as she had imagined, to the point that no one in the family, not even the neighbors, felt that anything was unusual. After Rohit's confession and Priyanka's arrest, the case took a completely new turn, and more details began to surface with each stage of the investigation. It was also revealed that members of Priyanka's family, specifically her father, the doctor who had been the first to confirm the heart attack theory, attempted to offer a bribe of 2 million rupees, around $20,000, to an officer named Inspector Ramesh, who was part of the Special Investigation Team, SIT, in order to disrupt the course of the case and weaken the evidence. This incident was actually recorded by an internal vigilance team. The officer was caught red-handed while accepting the money, immediately suspended from duty, and a separate investigation was opened against both him and Priyanka's father on bribery charges. This event raised even more suspicion around Priyanka's entire family, and led many observers to question whether they had known about the crime from the beginning and were trying to cover it up. At the same time, the prosecution attempted to charge Yogesh and Priyanka's daughter, Kwaish, as an accomplice in the crime. She had been present during both the planning and execution, and it was alleged that she was watching from the upper floor to alert her mother if anyone approached the house. She was also reportedly present during a trip to Chandigarh, where photos of Priyanka and Rohit together had surfaced. However, the Punjab and Haryana High Court eventually dropped all charges against Kwaish, citing that she was a minor at the time of the incident and that there was no direct evidence proving her active involvement in carrying out the crime. This decision sparked significant controversy among those following the case, debate that continues to this day. The case did not conclude quickly. On the contrary, it entered a long and complex legal battle that lasted for years. In court, the full picture began to emerge gradually. The prosecution presented a wide network of evidence: call records linking the accused at critical times, mobile location data precisely tracking their movements, and even the temporary SIM card, which they had believed would protect them, became evidence against them. In addition, there was strong circumstantial evidence, much of which had initially been gathered by a private investigation agency before the police formally stepped in. More than 25 witnesses testified in court, each testimony closing gaps and bringing the story closer to the complete truth. With every session, the narrative they had tried to hide became clearer. The trial lasted nearly 4 years. Arguments, adjournments, bail requests, each one denied, until the decisive day arrived. On October 6, 2021, the judge at the Yamunanagar court delivered the final verdict, more than 5 years after the crime. The ruling was clear and firm: life imprisonment with hard labor for Priyanka Batra, life imprisonment for Rohit Kumar, Matti, life imprisonment for Satish Kumar, life imprisonment for Shyam Sundar, Sonu. The court also imposed financial penalties. Priyanka was fined 60,000 rupees as the mastermind, while each of the other 3 was fined 53,000 rupees. The prosecution relied on multiple sections of the Indian Penal Code, most notably charges of murder and criminal conspiracy, ensuring that all parties, from planning to execution, were held accountable. In the end, the plan that was built to be a perfect crime without evidence collapsed under small details: phone calls, movements, and human errors that no one could fully control. And the truth they tried to bury with Yogesh came back years later and judged them all. This case opens the door to an important reflection: how a perfect crime could have completely escaped justice if not for a family that refused to accept the heart attack narrative without proper investigation. If not for the persistence of an elderly father in his 70s and the suspicions of a mother troubled by recurring dreams, this crime might have been buried forever along with its victim. The case also highlights a critical issue. The absence of an autopsy report can become a fatal weakness in any criminal investigation. And suspicion is not always mere paranoia. Sometimes it is the beginning of the path to truth. It also raises questions about the role of local police, who initially refused to take the elderly father's complaint seriously. Had he not escalated the matter to the highest authority in the state, the case might have been closed without any outcome. In the end, this crime serves as a stark reminder. The people closest to us can sometimes be the most dangerous, and love alone is never a guarantee, especially when confronted with greed for money or power. And with that, we come to the end of today's episode. If this is your first time on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new content. See you in the next episode. Goodbye.